3, 2, 1. Yes.
Maybe, yeah. I hope you enjoyed the discussion and the presentation of yesterday. I will quickly give the floor to Didier to make the introduction of today. And after I will introduce the first speaker of the day.
Hello. Hello. So, welcome. I will begin with a few technical aspects. The venue is here until 6 p.m. From 10 a.m. to go outside, you have to push on a button, and to go back, you have to ask me politely, because maybe otherwise I will refuse. Seriously, okay, it will be until 6 p.m. Coffee is provided, and there will be a small lunch with some sandwiches, and also an informal dinner from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Royal Indian Restaurant, Rue de la Fourche, 2-minute walk from the Grand Place. Thank you for coming here. I hope that the second day of the conference will be as good and interesting as the first one, maybe even better. Each speaker will have 30 minutes, and there will be plenty of time for questions normally. And at the end of the day, we will have a large discussion involving all speakers present to ask questions to each other, and also to approve a text. Okay. Now about the conference content. Like I said during the conference yesterday, the effective sharing of health data will save lives, many lives, directly by giving doctors direct access to patients' online record, and even more lives indirectly by accelerating medical research. But the big problem at the moment is that things are very slow at the European level. Yesterday we had interesting speakers to describe the situation. I also asked for ideas of quick wins who are there to accelerate sharing of data. You are also more than welcome to write more there, and also to write them on chat for the people who are now online. We also try to summarize those goals in a text. You normally receive the URL this morning very early, and you may comment until the end of the day. You can make comments, and then we will approve if there is enough consensus at the end of the conference. I will already read a few sentences of the text. The rapid advancement of artificial intelligence has captured global attention, presenting both opportunities and risks. While the risks are undeniable, they can be mitigated if we prioritize the application of AI for greater good, specifically in fostering health, humans, resilience, and longevity. We have for this to adopt standards and ethical practices, to ensure fair data. Fair is for findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. To employ robust techniques for anonymization and pseudonymizations to balance privacy and research needs, and to encourage the establishment of altruistic databases where data is voluntarily shared for the common good. Since the beginning of the history of medicine, healthcare has been delivered through collective knowledge, through individual experiences, often also with inaccurate beliefs and knowledge of the patient condition. It is only relatively recently that patient data have become an important part of the field of knowledge, not only for the treatment of individuals, but for medical research. One day, I hope, it could become self-evident that data useful for the rights to health are a common good, that we have to share with scientists. One day, medical research and research data on health and longevity could be accessible to all, enabling citizens to live longer, more supportive and healthier lives. So thank you for being here, and Nino will introduce the first speaker.
Thank you, Didier. So the first presentation of today will be with Yann Zolo, Senior Director of Business Development at Insilico Medicine, a globally leading biotech company revolutionizing drug discovery with generative AI. With a proprietary pharma AI platform, Yann's team accelerates the identification and development of novel drug candidates tackling complex diseases and aging. His mission is to democratize cutting-edge machine learning solutions, making them accessible and affordable for healthcare organizations and life sciences. Currently, he collaborates with an expert team dedicated to transforming drug discovery, biomarker development, and longevity research through AI innovation. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Nino. Thank you, Didier, for the invitation to this wonderful event. I'm pleased to be here. Okay, so I hope you can see my slide. So obviously, Insilico is not a new company. We have been around for quite some time, and
It's not
I let Didier.
You can continue speaking.
Okay.
Yes, I forgot about this. Should work easily. Yeah, okay. Prefer to go like this. And can you, David, how can I here? Something here, masquer les commandes flottantes de la réunion. This one also. Voilà.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Right, so let's jump right in. Just a little bit about me. So obviously, I'm being the employee of Insilico since actually April 2020. It's going to be 5 years. Prior to that, I was at other AI startups. So altogether, I've been in this space for a little over 12 years. And I'm also sort of interested in longevity as such as quite a few other of my colleagues at Insilico Medicine. So that's not something unique. Questions to be addressed in this presentation. Obviously, I want to sort of share a bit an update on the sort of major breakthrough and the drug discovery space. Want to talk about how was this achieved, what are the key success factors, and also how AI contributed, and obviously what will be the future of let's say pharmacological or biological intervention design with AI. I borrowed a very short, I would say, motto from our friend Sergey Young, from his book, which probably everyone already read. Pharma is indeed getting faster and smarter, and I will tell you more about how this is actually happening. Right, so this is the big breakthrough. I mean, obviously this was covered by most of the major media, more recently by economists as well, but just to very quickly summarize, the drug R&D is actually a very long, expensive, risky endeavor. And what Insilico Medicine is trying to do is actually drastically disrupt the way new drugs are developed. And this is essentially how we do it. So if you're not familiar with this story, this is the first AI-discovered, AI-designed molecule to ever enter phase 2 of clinical trials. It's not only first. I mean, by AI-discovered, we mean that we identify a novel target, which was essentially implemented in fibrosis and was never explored in that context using some of our platforms. But we also designed the molecule from scratch using a generative platform called Chemistry 42. We have done this in less than 18 months. I mean, less than 18 months took us to the preclinical candidate nomination. Obviously, it took us another 12 months to complete the IND-enabling studies to apply for phase 1. And we spent close to $5 million on actually doing this. And compared to how the pharma is normally doing, pharma takes at least 4 to 5 years to reach a preclinical candidate phase, and the costs are probably close to 100 million per successful candidate. So as you can see, we have managed to sort of beat a record, and as it was announced recently by CEO, nowadays we are able to nominate and develop preclinical candidate in close to 9 months. So we are already accelerating on this already very short timeline. And obviously, time is money in drug R&D. So if you can do things faster, you will also end up doing them much cheaper. Now, the question, how exactly did we do it? So we utilize our platforms. And I'm aware of the fact that there is quite a few boxes on the slide. And obviously, not every single platform was implemented in the story. But I can just highlight that the novel target was identified using PandaOmics platform. The molecule was designed with Chemistry 42 platform. And obviously, we had run a number of tests using the other applications within the Chemistry 42, such as physics-based docking, admitox profiling, and a number of others. And I will come back to these tools later in my presentation. Previously, or the traditional pharma R&D, the way it was done was pretty much a hit and miss project. So there was large screens of huge libraries of molecules. Hits were identified, and then obviously teams of scientists would eventually slowly develop those molecules into what we have as drugs. So we have a slightly different approach. We obviously always are very focused on identifying specific targets, protein targets. Essentially, it could be receptors, enzymes, kinases, ion channels, a number of others. So we really want to understand on the fundamental level in biology, what exactly is the protein doing in the body? How exactly is it interacting with others? And what can be achieved if we successfully inhibit or activate this protein, and what impact it will have on the body? So we are looking, so instead of looking for a needle in a haystack, we are actually designing the needle, if you like that metaphor. I also want to mention, and there was a very good presentation yesterday from Anton Olivia, which went into depth of what exactly is AI and what are the different methods and the entire sort of evolutionary path. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the specific AI methods, but I just want to remind everyone that although many people nowadays use AI and LLMs interchangeably, the world of AI is actually much richer and much older than large language models. So when I will refer to AI methods, I will not specifically mean LLMs. We would not be able to do this without data, of course, and that's also the underlying sort of topic of this conference, because data is extremely important, especially if you have a data-driven approach as we have. So the data that sort of powered our drug R&D engine is actually summarized on this slide. So we have a large number of omics data. 98% of those are from public repositories. You might be familiar with some of them, like G or TCGA. We also generate our own proprietary omics data. So altogether, we have been able to put together 22,000 omics data sets. I think close to 80% of them manually curated. And obviously, we have a pretty big depository of chemistry data as well. So around 1 billion of structures that we have, somehow profiled or predicted, and then obviously more than 2 million compounds that were used to train our models with very specific and concrete in vitro and vivo readouts. And we also process text. So we have been doing this ever since the company started in 2014. We still have a natural language processing team. So essentially, we are tracking a very large number of grant funding applications all over the globe, and PubMed and clinical trials and Wikipedia and many other sources. We do that mainly for that reason that there is already a pretty deep knowledge about much of the fundamental biology, which is already published. Sometimes the data is a bit scattered and hard to find, but having a good and reliable system is actually able to analyze this data, summarize it for us. And InSilico has done more than 160 collaborations since 2014. These are just some of the examples. Obviously, major universities were always are very valuable partners. We have published more than 200 papers, which are to be found in peer-reviewed journals. But we are also very active in working with the industry and also technology companies on basically data processing, data analysis. So that always has been a very sort of important thing for us. Okay, so let's take this maybe step by step. So how do we identify targets? We use a systems biology tool called PandaOmics. What it actually is, it's a large depository of data on top of which we have built more than 20. So it's actually in the current version 23 models, which help us define gene disease associations. Some of them are AI, obviously, I will talk about that. Some of them are classical statistics by informatics. Around half of those are trained on omics data and use omics data as input. The other half is based on text. So essentially what we are doing, we're taking 20,000 protein coding genes and we try to match them to the indication of our interest. We can run the engine in reverse as well, which allows us to basically take a gene and score and rank 10,000 indications for the gene and provide multiple layers of evidence. In the end, we can filter those ranks and based on novelty, safety, druggability, accessibility to ensure that the gene-protein hypotheses we generate are not only nice and clean, but they also potentially actionable as targets for drug discovery. This is a glance of some of the models that we have. Obviously, we are looking at, mutated submodules, which means that how are different mutations driving the expression in the cell or in the tissue. Causal inference, we're looking at transcription factors. Gene expression obviously is a very important element in the analysis. And then we have developed and trained two deep neural networks that help us generate these gene disease associations. One of them is heterogeneous graph walk. It's a graph-based model, and a matrix factorization, which most of us use in the recommender systems in YouTube, Netflix, and so on. So we have been sort of creative in this space, and we were trying to not only use the methods that are already there and they are established, but we also always look to invent new methods that can help us solve these problems. So once we identify the target, and basically, maybe I can just add that some of the targets have already been validated to some extent in laboratories, which means we already understand how safe or how effective they are in a specific tissue. So once we do all that and we decide to invest into, let's say, what we call prosecuting of the target, we would use the generative chemistry platform called Chemistry 42. The first paper published on this topic actually dates back to 2016. And so just want to remind everyone that InSilico was doing generative AI way before it was cool. Actually, back in those days, it was actually not cool. And people actually thought this is an approach which will never work. And probably it would be the same until now if there would not be the GPT breakthrough, because obviously that helped us, I mean, the AI companies in general, a lot in terms of sort of evangelizing the technology. So essentially what we are doing is we have a target, and now we want to find a molecule or design a molecule that would be inhibiting or activating a specific target. So we use a combination of generative algorithms. Currently, we have 42 different generative algorithms. Some of them explore the chemical space, some of them exploit the generated idea and try to basically navigate the chemical space into something which is safe, stable, druggable. But essentially what the user normally does is they imagine what an ideal molecule would look like in terms of physical chemical properties, and then instructs the system to generate ideas. Very often we generate millions of ideas, of course, and not every single idea is actually a good one. That's why we have built an entire series of reward functions, medicinal chemistry filters, and 2D and 3D descriptors, which means that in our context, the reward function is your virtual chemist that is actually trained to assess molecules that are generated and compare them to the original target product profile, which ensures that those ideas that do not satisfy the configuration would actually be filtered out and would not make it to the final selection. Obviously, there is a reinforcement learning element as well, which means the two different generative and reward functions talk. Different models generate different quality of molecules, and the reward function actually allocates more compute to those models that generate useful stuff, and actually take compute away from models which are not generating useful molecules in the context of the project. Basically, every single molecule is very closely scrutinized. I already mentioned that we have these medicinal chemistry filters, so we want to ensure that those molecules which make the short list, and very often we are talking about tens, maybe hundreds of molecules out of millions, are really drug-like and worth investing into synthesis and testing, and could potentially offer a good chemical starting place for the experiment. This is a more recent feature of the platform, but now we have, I think, close to 30 different parameters, which obviously describe what we call ADME-Tox properties. ADME-Tox essentially means how is a specific molecule absorbed or distributed in the body, excreted from the body, how does it interact with the tissue, with other entities in a cell and an organism, and obviously the success or the failure of a specific drug candidate very much depends on how this molecule actually behaves in the body. So that's why we put a lot of emphasis on training these predictive models, which essentially allows us to understand the molecule even before we enter animal models or humans in a clinical trial. This essentially already has an impact on the industry. You may have read a recent report from the group at the BCG, which essentially summarized a large number of AI-generated molecules and their success rate in phase 1, and the success rate of phase 1 was actually much higher than the average or the standard, over 80%. So, which means that AI does create interesting molecules which are safe by design. And obviously, it's maybe a different story about efficacy, which is normally tested in phase 2, but at least we know that we can generate safe molecules. This is just, again, a glimpse at different machine learning methods that we use, either for the generative AI, but also for the reward function. Yesterday, we had a good intro, so I will not spend too much time on those. So how the different platforms interact in an end-to-end engine. So obviously, Pandomics is the system that generates the target hypothesis, and then Chemistry 42 generates molecules. We do have to run this, design, synthesize, test, and adjust the STA cycles, which means that even though AI already predicts quite a lot, and we know quite a lot about their molecules, we still need to undertake some of the wet lab experiments, synthesize physical molecules, test them in different assays, and then generate data which then can be fed back to the system and generate better quality molecules in the next iteration. But obviously, as you can see, the number of cycles and the months that are involved in those cycles is actually much, much lower than the industry standard. Allows us to test more hypotheses cheaply, and therefore design more molecules that could be potentially drugs. Now, one step forward is, and again, this was mentioned yesterday already, we also have a robotics lab which is based in Suzhou, China. It is connected to the cloud. So essentially it's connected to all of our platforms. And what it essentially does is that every time we identify a novel target, which means a new protein never before explored in the context of a specific disease or a specific cell, we can very quickly set up experiments, some of them based on CRISPR, some of them knockouts, knockdowns. So different methods. And very quickly we can test the hypothesis in the actual living material. So different cell cultures. That essentially allows us to generate new data, which can be then fed back to PandaOmics, to the cloud, and reanalyzed. And we can do all that in a closed loop pretty quickly. The next step for us is obviously to automate the synthesis for the small molecules, and hopefully at some point attach this ecosystem to, let's say, hospitals or some other places which actually take care of patients, so we can deliver this innovation to the patients directly. An update on another platform. So recently we also launched what we call Generative Biologics platform. The reason why we did it, obviously, very often you come across hypotheses and some proteins are just not druggable by small molecules. So we wanted to expand on the modality options, and therefore we sort of reuse some of the generative approaches we developed for small molecules and apply them to biomolecules. So right now we have a system which is able to generate alpha helical peptides, antibodies, and antibodies from scratch, or optimize existing molecules and optimize them for better properties such as binding affinity, developability, and so on. So we are greatly extending the modality options that we offer. I wanted to talk a little bit about Precious, because in the context of aging is obviously sort of the biggest project we have done to date. Yesterday we saw that in action, so Anton demonstrated what it actually does, so I'm not going to talk too much about this. Just wanted to remind that there is actually 3 models and 2 different publications which I recommend reading. The Precious 1 GPT was essentially developed to be an aging clock. Precious 2, sort of on top of that ability, also was capable of generating synthetic data or controls for some of the experiments where these controls were missing. And then the Precious 3 GPT already has also the small molecule emulation component integrated. Right. Wanted to cover a few case studies before we end. I'm not sure how much I'm doing on time, but just maybe 3 of them. So the first, very relevant in the context of aging, we have published this collaboration with University of Chicago, Liverpool, and also Morten's lab in Copenhagen, where we actually mapped 145 targets. So we call, obviously, these are genes, which we essentially identified as being implemented in age-related diseases, and then we map them to hallmarks of aging. Again, it's a very nice publication. I do encourage everyone to read this, if not already. So we managed to find, obviously, we have confirmed anti-aging properties of AKT1, mTOR, SIRT1, IGF-1, but we have also found a large number of other potential candidates. Then we published a study, so pretty much the entire research community can potentially explore some of these ideas. The other one is managed to identify novel targets for ALS. This was a very interesting study because here we collaborated with a couple of KOLs, I mean, global KOLs in the Johns Hopkins Mayo Clinic, also in Cambridge. But we also worked with the ANSA ALS, which is a patient group who were willing and very nice of them that they actually shared the data, which we then used for analysis, and we nominated, I think it was altogether 27 new targets potentially explorable for ALS. And there is an entire website dedicated to this project. So if you would like to see how a patient data can be effectively used to identify novel therapies or novel therapeutic options, then this is a very nice case study. And then one which made it to the news as well, where we obviously took AlphaFold. So obviously the idea was to see how powerful AlphaFold predictions are. So we identified together with the University of Toronto a novel target which we believed was strongly implemented in HCC, hepatocellular carcinoma. It was CDK20. There was no structure published about this target, so it was completely dark. We knew very little. So we used AlphaFold to predict the structure, and then we generated molecules based on that sort of homology model, essentially, of the protein. We have found, or we generated a number of nanomolar hits, so high potency hits, and we tested all of those in vitro validation in assays that were available at the University of Toronto, and we done that all in 30 days. Now, I guess I don't have to maybe explain like how actually quick this entire experiment was, because normally it could take a couple of years to basically get from a target to in vitro validation. So we have done it in 30 days just to demonstrate how powerful these approaches are. And I want to wrap up with a couple of maybe slides on the future. Obviously, we are not the only company that is in the space. We are probably the oldest company in the space, but not the only ones. So I'm sure you have seen BioAge, who are making a big leap in actually, AI position molecule for aging, and there is obviously the usual suspects such as Altos, Calico, but also smaller companies and InSilico spin-out, Deep Longevity. I want to bring your attention to the ARDD Congress, which is probably the biggest at least in Europe, dedicated to aging research. And I think we already had 11 annual editions of this. This will be the 12th. Started small 12 years ago in Basel. Now it's really big, and I myself going to be there next year. So looking forward to meeting you. And we had a webinar, but it was already this week. So that's, we have a target identification course if you would like to see what we do, and it's obviously free. You can try that. It's about 8 hours of content, mostly videos explaining systems biology approach to therapeutic target discovery, and you also get access to some of our platforms which you can then use and explore in this context. Right. So thank you very much for your.
I have a quick question about the course which you mentioned. Is it okay for like beginners to take the course? Because you have very little to no idea.
Oh, it's supposed to walk you through.
Can you repeat the question? So, yeah.
Okay, so we have a question about the course itself. So it's actually a very sort of, I would say, easy to comprehend approach to target discovery. So essentially, it takes you through each step, explains why and how each step is sort of executed. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty much for everyone. We have high school students doing this and enjoying it.
There's a question from George on Zoom. So,
Yeah. Yes, George, you can ask your question.
Yes, thanks for this really exciting talk. I'm wondering, you are doing lots of predictions, regression-based, classification-based. How do you deal with uncertainty? Like, did you, for example, look into conformal predictors? That's a pretty recent framework, or maybe Gaussian approaches.
Okay, thanks, Gord. I don't have every single technical detail about these predictions, but obviously we are looking at a number of conformations that we are trying to predict with different models. But if you would be interested, we can continue this discussion offline. I can connect you with the team which is developing these models. And, also watching your talk yesterday, I think there is a lot of overlap of what we do also in terms of bioinformatics, especially intervention, impact prediction. So we'll be happy to chat after the conference as well.
Yeah, very good. I would get in contact. I've also been at the AARD and talked to Alex and so on. So I think it would be nice to have a meeting, maybe even before December or before Christmas or after. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jan. It's better that you come here. You can speak there. Yeah, normally it works.
Yeah, thanks for the very impressive talk. I actually remember also one of the very first AARD conferences. You had like these backpacks with these logos, and actually people still today asking me the train, oh, what does this mean? So, maybe very let's say more popular question. So if someone asks me, so but what is actually what's the outcome? So could you maybe could you name a drug which has been, or treatment that has been, well, which is thanks to you, or which you helped facilitate come into action?
Okay, so I wish I could tell you an approved drug that was already discovered by us, but that's not the case, of course, because although we can speed up and automate much of the preclinical work and discovery work, the clinical trials are still highly regulated endeavor. So therefore, it still does take quite a few years to actually get a drug properly tested and approved. So we are not there yet. And to our knowledge, none of the AI drug discovery companies have managed to reach the market. But we are already in phase 2. We already had a positive readout meeting both of the primary endpoints. So if we are continuing to be successful as this, we probably could have a product approved in 2 years. And I think we might be the first ones to actually reach this stage. Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you for that great talk. Next speaker is Sophia Palmieri. Sorry, I'm saying her name wrong. She is an expert at the intersection of healthcare, AI, and law as a researcher for FWO and Healthcare AI Policy Officer at IHE. She specializes in patients' rights, medical devices, and healthcare compliance. Today, she will talk about AI use in longevity research and treatment, ethical and legal issues. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. So happy to be here on this Saturday morning. Let's keep it a bit more cheerful so we stay a bit awake. So I've tried to prepare my presentation based on what was not in the other presentations, because otherwise it would have been a bit repetitive. So I've also seen that yesterday there was a colleague of mine from the European Institute of Innovation to Health Data that talk about the European health data space and data quality, so I won't touch upon that. What I will try to do today with you is trying to see what happened when actually some of AI innovations arrive to the treatment field, and so that finally our patients can. Yeah, no worries, it's okay. We can figure it out. Yeah. Actually, I'm Italian, so I like to move and stand, and so okay. Indeed, we have seen, I think, in the presentation of these 2 days, maybe I will do a bit seated, a bit stand up, I will figure it out. So we have seen that AI in longevity research and longevity treatment can be used in many, many different ways. But my research so far has been focusing on how AI is implemented in treatment for any kind of treatment.
So in that regard, when we talk about longevity treatments or age-related treatments, the legal considerations, the ethical consideration are not very different in this field than any other, because we have to do the maths for artificial intelligence in clinical practice. And in that sense, it's not very different from other fields. Of course, implementing AI in clinical care brings so many legal questions, so many ethical questions. I don't know if any of you have a legal expertise in the room. Okay, fantastic. So I can say whatever. Basically, the many questions that I've seen during my PhD and in my work at the Institute are mainly related to three main areas that I call medical AI competencies, patient-centeredness, and medical AI safety. We start with medical AI safety, but they are all part of a bigger ecosystem of trust, we can say. Like in the European Union, we talk about trust. We talk about how do we ensure that the AI system that we bring to the people, that we use in front of the people, is actually used in a trustworthy way and respect fundamental rights, ethical values, principles valid in the European Union. So starting with medical AI safety, basically, when we talk about medical AI safety in the European Union, we go back again to that plan of making artificial intelligence trustworthy. What does it mean in our legal acquis? It means to have some technical requirements that applies to our AI systems based on the risk classification. And this is what the AI Act, together with the medical device regulation, but also the in vitro device regulation in the case of the presentation that we saw before, how the two regulation comes together, and basically the risk classification of the two has to be summed up, and the requirements basically has to be satisfied contextually at the same time by the two manufacturers. So both the manufacturer of the medical device, but also the one of the AI. What happens? We indeed have to comply with these requirements. We indeed have to make them sure, and we will be label them and put them in the market. Now, we do have some issues when it comes to medical AI, and mainly the two issues related to safety is clinical evaluation, access to market, and HTA. What I mean is, when we talk about health technology assessment for artificial intelligence, we have no specific framework. One of the projects that the Institute of Innovation through Health Data is engaged with right now is trying to elaborate an assessment framework, basically what happens after the CE label is applied to our AI system. What happens then? Once the requirements are all satisfied, national bodies that pertain to the HTA framework have to make an economical medical evaluation to that AI system and finally allow it in the national market. Now, this assessment is not very clear, is not coherent in all the different countries in the European Union. At the same time, now the Medical Device Coordination Group is working together with tech companies and also with the legislator related to the AI Act to see how the medical device regulation and the AI Act comes together. Because the problem is when you add a regulation on the top of another, despite is with like all the goodwill you can have, you always have some implementation issues. In the case of the medical device regulation and the AI Act, the problem is that they regulate access to market in a very different way. So basically, according to the medical device regulation, you should have already a CE label to enter the market, when according to the AI Act, you still are in the trial phase, in the sandbox phase, basically according to the AI Act. So now we are still waiting to see how this is going to be solved from a legal point of view, from a matter of applying the two regulations together. Now, Passing to medical AI competencies. This is one of my favorite points, actually, because when we talk about artificial intelligence in healthcare, we often think that it's going to take over the majority of the tasks, that it's going to automatize whatever we do in healthcare. And that's not really the case when it comes to medical practice. So during my research in the last now 5 years, I've been trying to identify which will be the role of the healthcare professional according to the applicable regulation, but also according to what AI can do in the medical practice. And basically, what came out is that the healthcare professional should have both a role as AI controller and AI mediator. What I mean with that is that as AI controller, the healthcare professional should have sufficient skills to validate, refuse, challenge the output of the AI system used in healthcare, right? As AI mediator, the healthcare professional should be able to, build trust from the side of the patient towards the AI system, basically bring the innovation to the end user, bring the innovation to the affected person of the treatment, right? And what I've tried to do in the research was trying to see whether in the various regulation that applies to the skills of healthcare professionals, that all the regulation that applies, and see what a doctor is supposed to know when practicing medicine, if there is anything related to digital skills, and there is not. So we have a massive problem in terms of medical competencies, even leaving AI aside. Just in terms of digital competencies, healthcare professionals are not by law supposed to know something about digital treatments. Yeah, I noticed that there are some questions as well.
Yeah. Just no, go.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, according to what we know, according to the law, healthcare professionals shouldn't have a competence. It's not moving anymore, right? Yeah. So what I've tried to do then was trying to see if, according to the AI Act, I don't know how familiar you are with the AI Act. Zero? Very little. Very little?
No,
You like it? Okay.
A
A bit. Okay.
Maybe it's a joke.
Okay, so basically one of the most interesting article with regard to AI competencies is Article 4. Article 4 is completely dedicated to AI literacy. And it's very interesting to read the article and try to think how this is implemented in the healthcare field. Because according to that article, it would seem that healthcare institutions have a sort of responsibility to train healthcare professionals in using artificial intelligence. And this would have massive implication when it comes to medical liability structures. Okay. At the same time, the AI Act gives us another input when it comes to medical competencies in Article 14 of the AI Act, that is human oversight. There is a bit of a discussion going on in the academic field for sure, but not only, because I was talking with a friend from MedTech the other day, and he was saying, yeah, we are actually struggling with that as well. So basically, this requirement says that a human should always oversee, should always be able to reverse interact with the process of the AI system while being in use. That human in the healthcare field is most likely the healthcare professional. Now, obviously, in reality, how it works in hospital is not the healthcare professional alone that operates with the devices, but normally there are technical bodies that help him or she out in working with these devices. So therefore, we might think that the human oversight is the healthcare professional or is a team of experts with different technical backgrounds. What is important to stress is that the human oversighter is supposed to have technical skills on artificial intelligence. to reverse the process, to know how to read the outcome. So in the moment in which the healthcare professional is recognized as human oversighter, he's supposed to have certain competencies. Now, there is another article in the AI Act that would suggest, again, some competencies for the healthcare professional, but it's way more closer to the realm of patient-centeredness. Now, let me see what is the next slide. Okay, so we go there later. So, as I said before, the problem is that if we suggest that the AI Act is giving some competencies, is ascribing some competencies to the healthcare professional, then the liability structures change, because not only the doctor will be liable under medical liability competencies and medical liability structures, but also according to the AI liability framework, which has been approved like this week somewhere. At the same time, in medicine, it would be very hard to use artificial intelligence and get away with any unfortunate effect, because AI is not yet the standard of care. As the previous presenter was saying, it's very hard now that AI instruments get to the market and get actually employed, because we are still not at that stage yet. We're very far away from there. For now, we are talking about all of this, but it's still very much a hype. So we like to be prepared. We like to have all the legal answers to the problems, but this is not reality yet. So the problem is that in the moment in which we are going to use artificial intelligence in healthcare and a doctor follows outcome of an AI system, well, we would have a problem if something goes wrong, because the doctor cannot say, I just respected the standard of care, I just followed the best course of medicine, the golden standard, and it would have quite some issues in terms of medical liability. This is actually a real problem, because it isn't, how do you say, it actually scare out. What is happening? Wait up.
Yeah.
So, okay. Okay.
It's not you.
Just guy, mute your computers. Okay. So, what I was saying, thanks. The healthcare professionals are a bit skeptical in using artificial intelligence right now, because they cannot justify it scientifically, the follow-up of the outcomes according to the rule of medical science, unless the AI outcome is mirroring exactly the standard of care. No, it's not happening anymore. Okay, now, in terms of patient-centeredness, and I think this is the most interesting aspect related to longevity care and aging treatment. So basically, in healthcare, one of the main principles is patient-centeredness. What it means is that there is a constant, discussion and bilateral intervention of values and knowledges between the doctor and the patient. It means that medical knowledge can only be practiced when in accordance to the patient values, right? And in the legal sphere, we have, which is actually also a very ethical norm, we have informed consent. Informed consent is like the materialization of that principle of patient-centeredness. Basically, let's try to bring medicine closer to the patient that actually respect his values. Now, when an AI system is used in healthcare, one of the main issues related to patient-centeredness is how do we bring the patient aware about the use of an artificial intelligence in their care? And if we have to make them aware, because that's also a very valid question, is it relevant to let the patient know that there is an artificial intelligence in use? Then we can make some considerations, because this is always a very interesting point to discuss. I think in the realm of longevity care, in the realm of aging treatments, this is incredibly interesting. Why? Because there is a sort of ethic implied in how the AI system is used. So let me get you an example. So we might have an artificial intelligence system, for example, for supporting medical decisions that is technically forced to choose the outcome that is more, that is, how do we say, that support an ethic of life. What I mean is better to live longer than live more qualitatively, okay? For example, it's a bit of a dystopic example, but it's just to get you the point. The problem is the patient supposed to know that inner ethic inside the medical decision supported by the artificial intelligence? Because perhaps the patient doesn't want to live longer. Maybe the patient wants to live less, but in a way more qualitative way, or vice versa. So this is a very valid point, and this is a very interesting point to discuss, I think, because right now, in general, how we regulate informed consent is still very vague, with or without artificial intelligence. The informed consent structure is very much related to the freedom of the healthcare professional. The healthcare professional, even in Belgium with a law on patient rights, there are many articles that says that basically, well, Article 7 and 8, that basically the healthcare professional should, according to the patient that has in front, disclose the amount of information that is appropriate to the patient, that the patient can process, that the patient can consider useful to make a informed choice, a valid medical choice. But there is nothing that tells you which kind of information to disclose to the patient, let alone artificial intelligence, let alone the ethic involved in the processing of your data, let alone the ethical behind the medical choice of the artificial intelligence. So there is no single answer that fits all the, there is no single answer that fits all these questions. And saying that artificial intelligence should always be disclosed to patient is actually absurd, because this is not how healthcare now works. Also, there are two main points that we should consider when actually processing this information about whether the patient should or should not know. Is the fact that artificial intelligence most of the time, when it's useful, is not transparent, is black box, is not explainable. And so we will tell the patient, we will give the patient some information that are approximate, that are not actually reflecting the process of the AI system. So we will just explain the patient something about AI for the sake of the explainability, but not because actually we have some valuable information to give the patient. Second point, the desirability of those information. Again, we have said that the disclosure degree of information to the patient is very much matched to the patient that we have in front of us as healthcare professionals. So if we have an elderly person, for example, how much valuable is the information about the artificial intelligence use in their care for that patient, for example, especially in a moment of vulnerability, as is the one of healthcare delivery. So the second point is very much the desirability of that information, the understandability of that information. So my point a bit is that inferring that we have to inform the patient 100% because yes, we should, is absolutely absurd and it cannot work. What I strongly believe, and this is part of my job at the Institute, is really developing frameworks for health digital literacy for every kind of patients, for every kind of healthcare professionals. Because that's, for me, the investment point right now, is really making the patient aware, is really making the patient able to understand the information that he wants to understand, that are valuable for him, for his decision about the medical path that he's carrying out. So just to sum up, I made 3 points. One related to safety of medical AI, one related to medical competencies, one related to patient-centered use of AI. So medical AI safety, for now, is very well regulated. We have some regulation that applies at the same time. We are very happy about those, at least in the academic field. probably the companies are less happy about it. Absolutely sure about it. But we still have some issues in bringing them together, especially with regard to clinical validation, especially with regard to health technology assessment, especially with regard to access to market. Secondly, medical AI competencies. It's amazing what we can do with artificial intelligence in clinical care, but it's not going to automate every kind of process, every kind of relation we have with the patient. So medical healthcare professionals should really be made aware of the potentialities, but also the risk, the ethical challenges, and the technical features. And it's very hard to find a degree of the acceptability of those competencies, and also what is reasonable to ask from medical people, because they are already asked to know so many medical competencies, and now we are asking something more. For sure, we should update, but it's not going to happen under the Hungarian presidency. We should, probably not, but it's because it's not in the priority of the Hungarian presidency. We should update medical competencies in general with regard to digital skills. This for sure, with or without artificial intelligence. Lastly, autonomy enhancing solutions. What I mean is, it's very nice to talk about informed consent, but informed consent is not the problem, because the problem is that the people don't have a health literacy, let alone the digital health literacy. So we still have a lot of work to do in that regard. And I think this is very, very valuable in the perspective of enhancing aging-related treatment. This was all from my side. And wait, I forgot to add a slide, but I think my colleague yesterday already promoted the conference. So in Jens, right? In Brussels, in March, we have a conference, the Health Data Summit. We're going to talk a lot about artificial intelligence. We're going to talk a lot about health data and quality of health data. So you're all very welcome to join us. Thank you.
Yeah, for this time, I will directly, I would say, make my first comment and maybe ask a question. Yeah, I would say each time I'm listening to somebody speak, knowing a lot about what's happening, it becomes even more complicated, you know?
Absolutely.
And also each time I'm going to a medical doctor, I see the difference between theory and what's going in practically. And also almost each time I'm listening to a long conference, let's say, I learned something. I learned that something that I thought was true is not true. Or yeah. So in very short, it will never work if we are trying to go like this with more and more and more and more layers of legislation. So how? Yeah, I don't know how to say that, but how can we simplify things that it's really going to work pretty fast? And one of the things people were saying, it's you don't need to wait that the new legislation is compulsory. You can already start things. So what would you not as a person who knows a lot about Belgium situation, what could start today that it's not started yet concerning the European health data space? Yeah, I see that it's not, you don't have an answer like that. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I can try. Just absolutely, the health data space is not my field, but I'm involved in many European projects with regard to that, so I have some ideas anyway. And one of the main challenges that I see at the Belgian level is the interoperability.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying that.
Yeah.
And everybody is very much in favor of the European health data space because it brings potential. It brings a lot of benefits potentially, especially for research, but the problem is that we don't have the infrastructures to allow that to happen. So I think in Belgium, even though Belgium is a very virtuous reality, let's be honest, we're way much ahead compared to many other European countries. So I think we are a good pilot, right? At the same time, Estonia, for example, has a very successful way of implementing these infrastructures. So I think we should a bit humble down and see what other countries are doing, those that are very virtuous, and at the same time work on from a technical point of view on how to make that possible. Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So thanks very much. I think it was very clear and Paglia's presentation actually explained some of these things in a plain terms without unnecessary legal language around it. You know, there is a saying that if you're healthy, you have many problems. If you're sick, you only have one. And I think there is nothing better. I mean, nothing encapsulates patient centricity more than giving patients access to cutting edge treatments that are available out there in the world. I do see some of these regulations limiting some of these options for our patients in Europe. So what's your take on how will this AI Act impact, let's say, access to some of these maybe experimental, maybe cutting edge technologies?
Thank you. I really see your point and I see your struggle and I'm with you in that. So the AI Act. So before this week, I was in a conference with indeed MedTech people. So super frustrated about the AI Act, right? And what the point is, the risk is, because I'm with you on the fact that what patient wants is actually a treatment, is actually a solution, way more than knowing what is going on, right? Because the people that are lucky enough to understand what is going on, indeed are the healthy people most of the time. So is the AI Act creating a problem? I think it's creating a problem in the moment in which companies cannot comply with that. And that risk is especially true for small companies. And I do some consulting some now and then, and I see the struggle. I see the technical incapability of complying with the regulation that for now is not yet enforced, but it's gonna be a problem. And I think the risk is that companies will just try to sneak out. And this was already happening with the medical device regulation anyway. Like manufacturers will try to down classify the medical device. And the fact that the medical device regulation and the AI Act are so close, what is going to happen is that probably it's a double effect. It's going to reinforce what happened with the medical device regulation. So people are going to downstream their medical device so that the medical device do not figure as a high-risk AI under the AI Act because they are very much correlated. And so they won't have to comply with the AI Act as well. This is the main risk. And therefore, at the end, you're out. But what you produce is less safe because you're not tested, okay? So I'm not saying you're right or wrong. It's just, this is gonna happen, right? I had another point to make about the AI Act. Wait a second. No, it passed through my mind. No, it's gone. It's gone. I had a thought, but now it's gone. But I'm gonna come back to you about that. The problem is that people are not gonna comply in general, and it's gonna happen because if you start talking with manufacturers, yeah, it's really that their intention in general.
We have one final question.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think the major risk of AI acts and similar regulations, including European health data spaces, that usually it's implemented by bureaucrats who don't really understand that much in technology. And even though things can be implemented in a proper way, that usually it's implemented bureaucratic way. And in terms of, for example, so there are some real problems that I've seen in, for example, medical AI. Typical problems that startups, they train their models in some distribution. For example, people from 30 to 50 years old, and when a patient that is like 60 years old would come, then it may not be as accurate. So such things actually, I think what can benefit if maybe there will be not enforcing, but some best practices that would allow more transparency, and not like you forbid, but to use something that transparency on the way how AI systems were trained, and because often patients actually have higher competencies than doctors in AI, and is maybe it makes sense like that a patient later can read the paper, what were the benchmarks, what the AI system does, and make an opinion.
Okay, I see you're a technical person, because the impression you have about patient is very much biased. I mean, I don't think many patients can understand what an AI system is. Like, I really don't have that impression. Like, and I work with patient association most of the time, and we're not there yet. Like now, the European Patient Forum, I don't know if you know them, they're making an amazing job with the European Health Data Space. And they there is this project called Data Save Lives, and they are bringing patients aware of health data transfer or other kind of health data related usage. And that's a very virtuous process, but most of the time, even in Belgium, but it is a highly health literate kind of country, like patients don't have any idea about artificial intelligence most of the time.
And the patients associations, there are some technical people that could help.
Of course.
If there is enough information provided, more like how much, so they can just read documentation and tell the other patients that, oh, you know, this model has a problem.
No, but wait, I don't understand your point probably. So I think one end is the fact that the AI system can be trained on certain data sets that represent a certain type of population. And then if I got your question correctly, in case
Transparent when it was applied and trained. So at least people, if they want to know, they should be able to read it. So that should be like a ways if a person by accident is technical or have a technical friend, then there should be clearly provide the links that they could actually give it to a technical friend and read about details, because often such information is not provided by anybody, and it leads actually to troubles. Many medical AI fail just because of it. Like, for example, Watson, it failed because of this distribution mismatch.
Okay, so there is with regard to that, the AI Act tried to make an explainability kind of requirement, right? So one of the requirements says, try to explain your system as much as you can first. And the second is about data training and accuracy. So basically, you're supposed to say on which kind of population you trained your AI system, and if it's supposed to be used on the same kind of population, or if you can enlarge the scope of the application, for example, to other people, and with which kind of accuracy, with which level of accuracy you can use. So I think the AI Act is trying to go towards you in that sense. I'm not really sure it's going to work, because there is always a margin of uncertainty. There is always a margin of non-explainability. But I think the AI Act is really much trying to do what you are saying.
Patients would be able to access would be nice.
Yeah, we have one more talk and then we have a break. So the
Oh yeah, then we can talk for 1 hour or so.
Yes.
Okay. Wait, I'll
thank you.
take out. Yes.
No.
Voila.
Okay, thank you. So our next speaker is sorry. Yeah. Okay, so we have finally Oleg with us online, so we will listen to his presentation. Oleg is an entrepreneur and founder of Longevity in Time Biotech. longevity scientific resort in the Maldives and the Longevity Coin. His company pioneers a real-time technology for early disease diagnosis and prevention, leveraging AI-powered life expectancy, prediction, and clinical trial simulations. Today, Oleg is going to talk about AI, LLMs, and sharing of health data and the latest perspectives of it. Oleg, you can share your screen. Thank you.
And don't forget to unmute yourself because we cannot hear you at the moment.
Yes, hello, my friends.
Okay.
Do you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, we see your screen.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I've been in this field for 6 years and tried different approaches. I was consulted by Alexey Moskalev and Vadim Gladyshev in 2018, and they brought to me the idea that the only longevity way is to cross-check yourself with many parameters as possible. And I realized that maybe this is the best approach to fight the longevity and early death causes. And we developed an app for tracking up to 400 parameters online. And we realized that the audience, they don't need it. We were trying to change their mindset, and you as the people from longevity field, you know better than me that the mindset is the biggest warrior we should battle with, and it's coming from regular people up to the presidents and high profile individuals who possess huge powers and money, and they do everything besides fighting the causes of death. And let's imagine it's like an asteroid which is approaching the Earth. We all have like 350,000 hours left, and
it's always here.
We're yeah, well, we are all facing that asteroid coming, and nobody's doing anything to. I mean, there are about 1,000 people who are doing something, but in general, it's nothing to fight this asteroid, which is going to kill everybody. So we were developing different projects. We tried to approach high-profile individuals, launching a longevity scientific resort. Then we were trying to make the longevity leaflets for the customers of different hotels that they can just make their health checkup during their vacation. You know that when you go to the vacation, you are just your mindset, and you're trying to do something new, and you're open to lots of new things. So all that things didn't work out. We realized that the best thing in longevity, since there are not so many investors, is to be self-sufficient company. So we even hired a great team of developers who are working for equity-based model. So we were just having like zero burn rate flow, and that's why we survived 6 years of our operations. And but of course, the motivation of that people who are working without money is by the times, especially 6 years, is dropping low, and me myself as well. So I was just thinking, what is the best way to combine, to blend the current technologies with longevity, and realize that the only way today, besides making the cross checks for yourself, if you are targeted to live actively and you want the radical longevity today without fundamental science involvement, because it will take years, decades for all the interventions which are breaking the news to go on the market. So there are two basically longevity recipes: is to cross-check yourself with hundreds or maybe thousands of parameters 3-4 times a year, and as a physical person, and as a business industry, the only way is to make AI simulations of clinical trials, because with AI, with machines, we can replicate and we can predict what's going to happen in real world clinical trials in weeks using AI, then what's going to happen in the years. to come. So we developed technology to simulate clinical trials using the real world data, building the data set based on the current interventions which are already on the market, and to simulate, without looking at the results, of course, and simulate these interventions and to see how our prediction model can make similar or better to what's existing using AI methods, and to try to build the prediction model based on that simulations. So in other words, we're taking the income data for any kind of clinical trials which have taken place 10, 15, 20 years ago. We make the same simulation, we make the simulation of the same interventions, and we can review the outcomes because these interventions are on the market already. Up to 3,000 of that simulations, we can build a data set which can presumably, with a high accuracy, make the simulations of any kind of fundamental research, which right now is on the mouse or on any other stages, and in weeks to predict how these outcomes of the clinical trials will happen, but here, now, today. So we believe that this is the fastest way to fast forward the clinical trials on humans using AI technologies, and to change the mind of the FDA and the other government institutes to let the scientists to use the outcomes of these AI simulations so they can fast forward to get to the fourth clinical stage using the outcomes of these AI simulations. And we believe this can be a great breakthrough. So it could be interested, it could be in interest of this kind of potential groups of people, the high-profile individuals which are in different stages of their health, and they can really test on themselves the outcomes of clinical trials simulations. The scientist teams, basically, medical doctors and big pharma. The market is quite the market is quite big for that, but I don't like any kind of predictions. I'm sorry, sometimes it's not working well. I don't like the predictions because I mean the predictions without using AI, because that's something which is could be like that or could be not. But the investors and the people from industry, they like this kind of approach. So we analyzed the potential of that market. The business model of that approach is to charge the institutions and potential customers for each stage of trial, which can be competitive to what it's been paid today. What we need is these 3,000 data sets of clinical trials, which already happened in life, but they are outside of public reach. We would like to find the teams of scientific groups which can review the outcomes of our models, which we can make using these 3,000 data sets. And we're offering a stake in our company regarding this venture, and of course the priority access to the outcomes of these simulations. There are lots of technologies like ChatGPT and so on, and like previous speakers talked about, but the difference of our approach is that we use only evidence-based and people-reviewed outcomes, which, for example, ChatGPT or other engines are lacking. Since we're small, we are independent, we are faster to avoid any kind of internal and external barriers. We're lower at the cost since, like I said, most of the team is equity based, but we need some small cash incentive motivation for the team. And like I said, we're 6 years on the market, longevity market, without risks to go bankrupt since our burn rate is 0. And we made some clinical trial simulations already, and the accuracy was up to 97%, which is quite high. And what I can say about simulations, it's a very nice approach to make the accuracy of the past clinical trials higher. So in other words, our accuracy can be higher than 100%, presuming that the previous clinical trials didn't meet the 100% barrier. And that's going to improve all the interventions which were developed to date using this simulation model. Actually, on one of the days I spoke with Aubrey de Grey, and as a computer scientist, he approved that this method of making data sets built on previous clinical trials could be the solution. And he was expecting me to say that. And well, I didn't learn any computer science or medicine, but we came up to that. We came up to that conclusion. In the past, I was a successful businessman. I had more than 6 successful projects, including one in Hollywood. I was advisor to Rupert Murdoch's M&A deal, and I passed. So I think if you can trust me, I can move forward the AI simulations and clinical trials and make it the same successful as I did the previous projects. And once again, I want to remind you, I know that you're in this field and you know that more than others, but with your everyday problems, you maybe forget that we have, with the audience, which is over 30, 40 years, only 350,000 averagely hours left. And let's forget about any kind of bureaucracy, any kind of formats of presentations, of reputation, of all that things which are going to eventually die in these 350,000 hours, and everything what we hold, knowledge, emotions, assets, money, whatever concerns, they're going to be gone. So maybe what we offer is not the perfect one, but at least it's worth of a try. Like, you know, when cryonics appeared, there were lots of skepticals, but I liked one comment. It's better to try than to freeze yourself than to be buried and to be eaten by the worms. At least you have 0 point whatever zeros and 1% chance. So this is the same thing. We should diversify all our efforts and to try to support any kind of teams behind any kind of initiatives, and especially to the new people to this market, to the longevity market, because I saw that I was participating in different conferences, and I saw that the organizers of longevity conferences, they don't like new names, unfortunately. And if you go to most of the longevity conferences, you'll see the list of the same people telling the same stories, pitching the same projects, a little bit maybe detailing what they have already pitched during last 3 or 5 years. So that's not helping to defeat the asteroid which is coming and will hit us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Oleg. We will take some questions.
Thank you, Oleg. David Wood here. Very interesting talk. What did you mean by saying you could have predictive accuracy of more than 100%? Surely 100%
no, let's
means everything.
Yeah, I understand.
How can it be better than 100%?
Yeah, you made. I understand what you're saying. For example, you made a clinical trial with the accuracy like like 97% of efficiency and so on. So for us, it's like 100%. And if we make a clinical trial simulation of the same intervention, which had already 97%, our AI model can make it maybe 98%, right? So it's basically more than 100% to the basic values of the first clinical trial results. So by this, we can, in our model, of course, if some interventions were already reaching 100%, we cannot make more, right? But if it was before 100%, we can, if our AI prediction model gonna work better, we can enhance the results of previous clinical trials results. Or maybe we can find the mistake in them. So maybe they were wrongly led to the market, and we can prove that.
Okay, thank you for that question. We have another one. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the talk. Very interesting. And actually, also following up on David Wood's question, and also a question I asked to the last speaker about how do you deal with uncertainty in those predictions? So there are various formalisms to do that, to kind of get a grip of how certain you are in those predictions, like those conformal predictions or prediction sets or Gaussian process regression or some others. Are you looking into that?
Yes, of course. Before making this project of AI simulations, we have developed 30 disease prediction models based on top 20 diseases, and they're in use. I can send them, and basically they were in the core of our mobile application, which didn't find the attention on the market because people don't want to get 400 parameters to measure their 20 diseases. It's ridiculous. But we used the data sets, and we used human evaluation, like scientists, doctors, and so on. But the best solution is to use AI to verify what it have done. So in other words, we are reassuming the results with AI and trying to find the mistake until we're making hundreds or thousands recalculations, and these mistakes will be found, or the model will solve it. Regarding AI simulations, it's a little bit another approach, since we are predicting an answered question, basically. So that's why we need 3,000 clinical trials input data, which was already in the market. But like I said, it's unreachable, and people are very busy with their everyday errands, and they are not sharing even with the data which is already been made in a product and is on the market. And I'm just stopped wasting my time knocking on the closed doors. So once we're going to get these data sets of the previous done clinical trials, we can simulate, as I said, without looking at the results. We can simulate this clinical trials, and if we will improve or will match the result or find the mistake, and this mistake would be proven, we can build a prediction data set. So if the 3,000 clinical trials simulations where we can check the results would be approved by scientific teams like they were correct, we presume that this data set results can build a prediction model without a mistake. Of course, there are lots of doubts in that, but we say it's better to try and fail than not to try. And like I said, it's another chance to fight this asteroid which is coming and will kill us all anyway, unless we can speed up and not lose this 15 years of traditional way of bringing to market the interventions.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Oleg. Can you hear me? Yeah. So this is Jan Solos from Insilico Medicine. Good pitch. I mean, it was an interesting presentation. As you rightly said, we did develop a system we call Clinical, which is essentially designed to clinical trial outcome prediction. And as you rightly said, it's an extremely hard problem to solve. We have published on this extensively, so you can look it up, where we've done some prospective studies with much lower accuracy than you reported. So I think we were between 78 to 90% accuracy, depending on the therapeutic area. So it's a hard problem to solve. So good luck solving it. Also considering how bad the data about clinical trial is out there, it's very biased, and it's very hard to actually use it for training anything meaningful. My question is, you know, we work a lot with big pharma companies, and obviously they're all very in favor of exploring how we could simulate clinical trials, because obviously they see cost savings, significant cost savings in that approach. The problem is that the regulators are not actually prepared to accept this type of simulations as part of the sort of data package that you submit. So how do you see the commercial potential of this product, and what would be the ideal use case in your opinion?
Good. Yeah, thank you. On the slide, sorry. On the slide which I represented as the competitive advantages and so on, we marked out as in silico as a, well, we don't count in this specific field as longevity anybody as a competitive, because with Booking.com or TripAdvisor you can choose. But with what we do, I mean, all our society does in longevity, if you not support your partners, your competitors, you will die as your competitor, as a physical person, will die. So I put there some companies, including InSilico, and the difference between us and the InSilico is that we are focused on AI clinical trials, and InSilico is more focused on the drug development. To drug develop, you need to confirm your clinical trials, right? So we are a little bit earlier stage than the drug development, and which is essential for companies like InSilico. That's one part. The second part, like I said, we can test the AI simulation model after we have concluded more than, well, it's preferable 3,000 clinical trial simulations to build this kind of prediction model based on that. But we already made like 5 or 7 simulations with all reachable clinical trials input and output data, which is in public use. So once again, if this 3,000 simulations will show the same accuracy, this will open the doors to the commercializations of that. And I think with the new Trump administration and Mr. Kennedy, who is posting so many interesting posts regarding FDA, the AI simulations approvals by FDA could be fast forwarded and will open another commercial doors. Even if not, like I said, we're very independent. We removed everybody from our advisory boards. So I'm the solid person who just make a decision. I don't want to die. And I'm going to come all over the barriers for that particular aim. So for me, commercialization is number 2 place, because I realize if we will find the solution, the commercialization will come. If we won't find the solution, we'll be selling the blueprint olive oil on the websites.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you, Oleg, for that presentation. We will take a pause of 15 minutes now, and let's be back at 11 to continue the discussions. Thank you. Okay, so we will start now. Okay, so we will introduce our next speaker.
Yeah.
He was a bit reckless. More than a bit reckless. Deceitful as well. Exactly. So he really went wrong way. It was not the right thing.
Okay, so our next speaker is.
I'll take it. It's a very difficult name. So good morning from me as well. My name is Charalampos Vasiliou. That's the Greek long version. The short version is Harry or Harris. Yep.
So he's a renowned expert in digital governance and health data strategies with a degree in AI from University of London and Oxford. He leads the GRNET's strategic planning unit, advising on public digital health transformation and open governance. Today, he's going to talk about the EHDS for secondary use in Greece, stepping forward in implementing the health data access body and other European initiatives.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this nice introduction. It's very nice to be here, and thank you for the invitation. It's actually a Saturday morning, as previous speaker said, so we'll keep it a little bit more friendly and warm. It's a small crowd, so it's. So I met some really interesting people this morning, so I'm really excited to be here and participate in this event.
You can go.
We're good? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
So just to sort of summarize this introduction that was done earlier, my name is Harry, and I am I'm sort of working with different hats over the last few years. Initially, I was working, and I'm still collaborating with GRNet. So GRNet is basically the executive arm of the Hellenic Ministry of Digital Governance in Greece. So the ministry is basically putting forward the policies, and GRNet is one of those organizations that actually implements it. So it has implemented gov.gr, which is the equivalent of gov.uk with public services and so forth. And around 2022, I got sort of involved in a project about EHDS. And back then, EHDS was just a word for me. And only a handful of people basically started, working a little bit on this. And my first mission was to assess the utilization of the existing network, which was My Health at EU at the time, to feature or to foster the secondary use of health data. So, I mean, by show of hands, how many of you here are familiar with EHDS? I mean, you've seen the talk yesterday? Okay, so that actually messes up a big chunk of my presentation, but that's okay. I'll handle. I'll try to accommodate as we go along. So back then, we started working on this assessment, try to see if the existing network of My Health at EU, which you probably know as well, which is the primary use of health data. It's an existing network that facilitates already countries involved in the exchange of information about patients, about prescriptions, etc. It's also evolving as well. And we came up to the conclusion that we needed a new infrastructure, a new peer-to-peer federated network for the secondary use of health data in EHDS. And then I got more involved into the specifications of this infrastructure, and I collaborated with the Hellenic Ministry of Health in Greece to actually start building the first health data access body in Greece, and the very first infrastructure actually for that. So that's my secondary role, let's say, and in this work group. And quite recently, I moved to Brussels like a month ago, and I'm now working as a consultant for DigiSante as well. So I'm working on the modernization of existing health systems and partially on EHDS. So you know most of this stuff already. The idea behind EHDS, it's the same as well with all of these data spaces that the Commission put forward a few years back. It's part of the whole strategy, as you know. So the health part was the initial data space because we saw COVID and we saw the impact that COVID had, and this was an urgent need, let's say, to put forward such a data space. And also health and health data is quite an important aspect in terms of security issues and regarding all those very delicate aspects in terms of the type of data that we exchange. And therefore, this was one of the first data spaces that needed to put forward. Obviously, there are others that are coming along, like about culture, about education, about finance, and so forth. But HDS, the health data space, was one of the first ones to facilitate the different issues that basically existed. So, I mean, data was not enough. There was not the availability of a central kind of infrastructure to facilitate that, to assist this exchange of this information. And we wanted to start looking at a very more, say, centralized solution for this part. So, I mean, one of the disclaimers I should probably do is the fact that my presentation and what I'm saying here is not obviously let's say, are the expressions of the Commission, just in case. These are just my understanding and my expertise on the matter. So we have different actors which are really important. We have basically the patients that they didn't have full control over the data, who to share the data with, and why are these data shared, and for what reason, and so forth. So we didn't have this type of mechanisms, and I'm looking also on the aspect of Greece as well, because we didn't have. I'm accepting people as I go along. It's okay. And we have also the professionals that didn't have a lot of access to this data as well. So one of the first things that we started doing in Greece is basically created an application and an infrastructure for keeping a very initial record, for a health record for patients. And then we did the paperless provision of medication. This was very popular during COVID days because it eliminated obviously going to your PG and to your getting all this information in and so forth. And that was the baseline for connecting to My Health at EU, which is actually right now the optional network if you want to be connected and go to another country and share your data with your doctor in a foreign country, for instance, to see your medical record and get the medicine and so forth. So, but this was not actually facilitated on a permanent basis for all member states in the EU. So we have the primary and the secondary. I was mostly involved in the primary care, because now, for instance, in Greece, there's a series of projects that go on about improving the format of the health record, of the digital health record for patients, basically based on the new standards from the Commission. There are projects going on to expand the existing services of My Health at EU, based on what EHDS is requesting for primary care. So you have reports from hospitals, you have results from the potential exams that you do, and so forth. And then there's the secondary part, which is something that at least in Greece, we are in the very, very early stages. We've seen other countries which are very mature in this, like Finland, the FinData structure. We've seen in France, we have the hub in France, which is also quite advanced. And certain countries from the different member states are trying to get up to that same level of maturity. And we have different variations on that. And that's also a very critical part that we're trying to get people sort of aligned on that maturity level. So we have the primary care, which is My Health at the EU, that's going very strong, and the secondary part. So I was mostly involved, and I'm still mostly involved in the secondary part, the health data at the EU, which is coming along. And this is quite an important network because we have a huge element of rare diseases, and as well as, you know, orphan drugs, and the fact that we were not able to share this information in a structured, secure, and standardized way. And especially for rare diseases, like I think this scenario that we discussed with many people, you could have, for instance, Finland and some research organization in Finland that has really super cool AI algorithms and runs really nice AI models. But for instance, they don't have enough data on specific rare diseases that are mostly, well, I mean, you could see more data appearing on patients in the Mediterranean, for instance. So you have what recent research has shown that you have around 6,000 different rare diseases, and only 6% out of that is it has a specific cure, for instance. And you know, people that have this type of rare diseases, actually a very huge percentage of those people really want their data to be shared just to find a cure, or maybe their data shared in order to have cures for other diseases, and to have a new healthcare sort of plan sort of decided and so forth. So this is a huge demand. And the secondary part is basically focusing on this specific aspect. So you have the first part, which is using this data for research. So you have specific usage, specific purposes, specific data that you want to sort of get your hands on. And this has to be done in a secure environment, analyzed in a secure way. Obviously, data needs to be anonymized or pseudonymized, and so forth. On the other aspect, you have the member states that you need to define at least one health data access body, or more than that. And the new sort of architecture emphasizes on the fact that you have different HDAPs, but you can have a single HDAP coordinator in the member state. So you have different health data access bodies in any country, having different types of data. So for instance, in Greece, we have organizations that are involved only for sort of collecting information about medicine, collecting information about prescriptions. Other bodies are involved with collecting information about insurance policies and so forth, etc. So you have different aspects or different organizations that could be potentially HDAPs. But you have one coordinator, and that could be also, for instance, the ministry of the country or a new organization that is defined. That's a bit general at the moment. And then you have the process, which is the most important part, about applying for a permit or applying for a data access on that. And then there's a whole process about accepting this or rejecting it, and also you're able to sort of object a little bit on that. And then once you get the permit, you have it for a specific period of time, you are able to start analyzing it and so forth. So this is the journey, more or less. So you have a researcher that he or she wants to get access to some data, and he needs to apply for a permit. And there is a sort of a data preparation. That permit could be on a single data set or an aggregated data set, with specific quality labels and so forth. And this, once created, it is located, it is placed on a secure processing environment for that research to access to it and analyze it for a specific period of time. And obviously then you have the results that are coming out of this analysis, which by law, by the new legislation, have to be publicly available as well. And then obviously you get a series of fees that you need to pay for using this data, and penalties, for instance, if you haven't used the data according to your original request. So there is auditing going on as well about whether this data has been used appropriately, etc. So the Commission has put forward a series of initiatives to help accelerate this difference in maturity in the different member states. So one of the series of projects they put together was a specific grant, a direct grant for all member states to be funded to actually create this infrastructure that would connect with the central infrastructure that the Commission is actually creating as well. So there is a central part created by the Commission, and all the member states need to connect to this infrastructure, as well as providing the services nationally. So this had different pillars. These direct grants have different pillars. I'm going to show you a little bit later on what I mean. So countries which are really mature, they could focus more on improving their quality of the data and how to improve the quality of the data stored and these type of activities. Other countries like Greece, they use this grant to build the whole infrastructure which is not in place. So this project in Greece has been obviously led by the Hellenic Ministry of Health, and it's also supported by GRNet and IDICA, which are two organizations belonging to the same Ministry of Digital Governance. IDICA is mostly focusing on the health applications. So by law, it has the authority to develop health-related applications in Greece. And GRNet is facilitating the whole policy, as I mentioned before. So we're doing a lot of development in cross-ministry, in cross-ministries in Greece. So this is the first part, the national level. This is what this grant is doing. It's basically trying to establish the first health data access body. You have different data holders that provide this data. I mentioned before different organizations that provide this data. And you have different data users internally in Greece that want to do this. So the first objective of the project is to establish this infrastructure. And the second objective is to basically interconnect this infrastructure with what's happening on the European Commission. So as you probably are aware, the Commission is also doing a lot on developing their own central infrastructure. They are already in release 2 of the functionality that it provides. So soon enough, countries would be able, through the one specific part of the infrastructure, to connect with this central part. So this is more or less the journey that I explained before. So you have a metadata catalog for each country that shows you the availability of the data, and then you have an application management system that you can apply for this data or aggregate the data. Once you get this agreement, this authorization, you get to put this data on a secure processing environment. I mean, not you, the ASAP or the data holder that has the data actually. And then you are able to analyze it and come up to conclusions and publicly report that. So this is more or less the idea. Now, where do we stand and what data do we have? So the first big pile of data that we have, and then the requirements, let's say, for building this, is obviously the legislation. There is one document that has been agreed before summer, and now member states are discussing the finalization of the commonly agreed text. So I think last week they were discussing the linguistics of the legislation. So it's going to take a little bit longer to be finalized, but there is also an initial version which member states can use as to what would be the final, let's say, the final outcome. The other set of information is TEDAS 1 and now recently TEDAS 2. TEDAS 1 is the project that was the pre-project, let's say, the preliminary project, the preparation project for EHDS. And now they have a new version, which is TEDAS 2, coming up to help with the specifications, to help with the onboarding of the different countries and so forth. So it sort of runs a little bit in parallel with the direct grant that I mentioned before. Another important project that's already also ongoing is the Health Data at EU pilot for secondary use. So there, what has started to be achieved is to start discussing a few things. For instance, for the metadata catalog, like what is the specifications? So it could be a discussion focusing on DCAT-AP, as you probably heard, it's a standard for having the metadata, and they're creating the health DCAT-AP, which is the application profile, the standard that will be used for describing health data sets, metadata for the secondary use. So apart from that, there's a series of projects going on there as well, which is also important. One final important initiative, it's the EHDS community of practice. So the Commission has been put forward a community of practice for all member states, where you discuss, you exchange information, you exchange best practices. More mature countries try to bring less mature countries up to speed and help them out with their own infrastructure. So you have the grant on one hand, and then you have the community of practice on the other hand. So these are very good tools that help you grow a little bit more on terms of your understanding. And of course, as I mentioned before, Health Data at EU pilot is not just putting forward some specifications like Health DCAT-AP, it's also building a preliminary version of this solution, of this architecture, and puts forward a few important use cases of how this should be or could be used. So you can see 5 different pilots led by different organizations. So you have ECDC, EMA, the Health Data Hub in France, and so forth, putting some cases in front with different countries. So they show how this data can be exchanged, how they can be analyzed, what results you can come out of it, and so forth. And these are the 4 business capabilities that these grants put forward. So the first one is for each nation to build their own national dataset catalog. Then you have the infrastructure or the system associated with data access and application management, how different people can access this metadata, they can view it, and they can apply for this metadata. Then you have the secure processing environment where these data are uploaded and then you can analyze them for a specific period of time. And finally is the cross-border gateway, which is the interconnection between your national infrastructure with the central infrastructure that the European Commission provides. So this idea, this journey is not only done internally for each member state, but can also be done by other member states, by other researchers in other countries that want to ask data from your country. So this is done through a centralized metadata catalog that will be available at the Commission level. Then where we are now in Greece is we are trying to finalize the analysis and design of these systems that I showed you before. And then from February onwards, we start building the solutions. So we have the data access management system. We are trying to focus mostly on open source solutions in order to build these tools. And we have really good examples from the community of practice, from our colleagues, for instance, in Finland, as I mentioned before. So we have really good solutions for the data access management. The national dataset catalog, we have examples coming from europa.data.eu. They have an open source structure for this type of metadata catalogs. But we also now have the Health Data CAT-EU, the Health DCAT-AP model that can be used for describing this metadata. And then finally, the secure processing environment, which it's the one which is a little bit more challenging as an infrastructure. In Greece, we have a few high-performance computing infrastructures and data centers, one also coming up. And this will definitely be utilized for these purposes as well. And finally, as I mentioned before, the cross-border gateway part, which to a certain extent, it's more or less defined by tools that the Commission provides. So this is more like the APIs that you will be using, the e-delivery infrastructure for connecting and exchanging messages and communication with the central infrastructure. So more or less, it's like you can do whatever you want in your country. This is, let's say, a sort of black box to me for the three basic systems, that's the catalog, the secure processing environment, and the data application. But for the cross-border part, this is like what we can use for all countries to be interconnected. So there is a set of solutions there which will be available. Of course, finally, I think the most important thing is what each country should do. And this is what we are trying to do in Greece. Because as I mentioned before, we are a bit behind in these aspects, and some other countries are following more or less the same steps, or some other countries are a bit in the middle, and so forth. So the very first thing that we are doing is basically assessing the financial needs, the operational needs, and the legislative impact of this legislation in Greece. And specifically, the legislative part is quite a challenging one. Another big task that we're involved in is trying to map these data sources that we have from different organizations to see what type of national dataset catalog we're going to end up with, and see the quality that exists, because the quality is also quite an important aspect. I went like a few months ago to a hospital in Greece to check something, because I felt a bit dizzy while landing in Athens airport. I felt a huge pain in my head, and I had to go to the hospital to just check it. I thought I was having a stroke, actually, which was not the case, thank God. And I went to the hospital, they did some exams, whatever. I went out, and I saw in my mobile app, the health app that we have, that I was registered in the hospital for a completely different reason that I entered. So the secretary there, you know, it was like 12 o'clock in the morning. She was obviously maybe very tired. So I said, I have a headache, this and that, whatever. And then she put something in just to enter me in the hospital. And then I left, and that was not updated by the GP that showed me, and, you know, made it more specific as I went along. So this is a very bad quality of data that exists because you have, let's say, a list of patients which visit the hospital for a completely different reason that they did. And this kind of culture does not exist definitely in Greece. We need to improve that in order to improve the quality of the data. So, for instance, for that, we need also to have capacity building, you know, to help people understand the quality, the need for quality, understand what we are doing this, etc. So the legislation is also another big part. So we have to see what are the gaps in existing legislation and what new legislation we need to introduce. The establishment of the HDAPs, for instance, is quite a huge deal. We need to interconnect a bit with the stakeholders that can provide this information as well. We need to create a sustainable operational network of stakeholders and a community in Greece, an equivalent community of practice that the Commission is putting forward, but nationwide. And I think this is useful for most of the countries to bring people together that actually provide this, like patient organizations that provide specific needs, for instance, or that they would like specific data to put forward, etc. The interoperability aspect is also quite an important one, the national interoperability aspect. In Greece, we have a centralized government structure, but in other countries like Spain, for instance, you have different governmental structures in different regions of the country. So you get different needs there as well. And obviously, one of the huge deals about the rights of the patients, the opt-in issue that has been the very long discussion in the legislation, how patients can opt in and opt out from this mechanism. This has been quite a huge deal when it was discussing in the triage in the Commission. So this is also another important aspect that we need to safeguard. This was the end of my presentation. I tried to give you a brief overview of what's happening, what are the recent developments, and a bit of what's going on in Greece, and show you problems and issues that probably are faced in other countries as well. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Okay. I'm on first, but
wow.
My actually interest is how your Greek implementation would handle a very typical use case when actually people want to publicly share their health data without restrictions on who will upload. For example, in my case, I open sourced my genome, and there are many people who did like this. And there are also communities like, for example, biohacking communities that have a leaderboard of their health biomarkers, and they actually strive to make it public without any ways to apply for health access, was just to let everybody download it. And will those initiatives be punished by new implementations or not?
That's a good question. Thank you very much. Well, I mean, I cannot really speak on behalf of the ministry, but I can tell you what are the problems with that, let's say. So the problems that we are facing is the fact that we don't currently have a very clear open source strategy in Greece, like not a very, let's say, commonly agreed or, so there's an initial issue there because we have an organization in Greece called GFOS, which is actually trying to implement open source strategies at policy level in terms of data infrastructure, etc. But certain aspects need to be adopted by the government, which is currently not the case. The second is the fact that I think we are a bit lacking behind on how to sort of create this infrastructure and deciding on these legislative issues that you mentioned. So these decisions have not been tackled yet. I think we need to finish with the mapping and see what type of data that we have. And then I guess the very first legislation aspects are going to be answering to what EHDS wants and also to this type of issues that you're mentioning. So, I mean, we're in a bit of a preliminary area for that answer, to be honest with you. But I think if that makes you feel better, that I think it should be freely available for people that have opted in. It should not be punishable. I think it should be freely available for, at least this is my hope. Well, see. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Next question. So I found your example with your hospital and your unfortunate medical occasion very relevant, because indeed at the Institute, we are always working with healthcare data quality, health data policy, sorry. And one of the issues is very much that healthcare professional have a different optic when inputting data than researcher, for example. So then the data they process are not relevant for with research anymore. They don't have a sufficient data quality. So I was wondering, is it for you, like you spoke about awareness, right? To bring awareness to health professionals. So I spoke about competencies. Is it sufficient? Is it enough? Like, what else can we do to make sure that healthcare professional, as like in a very broad way intended, help us out to have sufficient data quality?
That's a good, yeah, that's a very good question. Well, I think, I mean, you cannot really improve that unless you make people aware of why it is so important and try to push them to get more better awareness and as I mentioned before, do this capacity building on understanding the use behind this. So the first thing I think it would be to make a clear strategy and policy behind this educational program. So what we discussed with the ministry is the fact that, okay, we're trying to put this infrastructure in place. Technically, it should be fine, but you need to also make the people aware and train them at different levels on why they should be more careful about the type of data they enter and why this is so critical. And then we can try to put some, let's say, auditing mechanisms in certain points to try to minimize the error or the errors that exist. And then if you want to take it one step further and be a little bit more extreme, I think we can also have some kind of assessment of the personnel, of the people that are, you know, aware, that are, they understand, they are compliant, let's say, with these policies about quality of data. And they can be sort of kind of rewarding mechanisms for getting such a thing. I mean, I don't really see any other way of trying to establish something like this. Yeah, but it's a problem for sure. Yeah.
Can you put the question?
Okay, so what steps can be taken to ensure that all European countries achieve a similar level of advancement in health data management, enabling more seamless and homogeneous? Yes, This is a great question. This is exactly what the COP is doing. I think, at least from the Commission side, they have been doing a tremendous work to try to get all these countries aligned. So we did the assessment. In the assessment I mentioned before in 2022, for instance, we saw that there is a different maturity level. We saw some existing attempts that were made for having sort of European-wide domain for these data sets that we have Darwin, for instance, and Data Europa EU. It has a health data set as well. But the COP and the grants are doing exactly this work, I think. And for instance, in Greece, that the direct grant was for all member states. All member states, I think, got this grant for different reasons. And now they're working on the COP, and there are a lot of countries also participating in TINDAS too. So there is a definitely alignment there. Now, the critical, I think, for me, the challenge for me, I think, is for these countries to take advantage of these tools, because I see certain cases that the tools are there, but there's not a full, let's say, they don't fully take advantage of this thing. And we might be missing on this opportunity. And I think there should be more awareness of what this information is and how they can help you to speed up this process. So I think this is the challenge behind this.
Thank you. We have one last question from Didier.
Yes.
Actually, to be honest, a few last questions.
A few, wow.
But they are relatively short. The first one is, why is there the possibility to have more than one central organ in each country? I suppose it is because of the federal system, but honestly, I think it's really bad. You know, it's already complicated enough. And I know it's quite strange that for Belgium, we still don't know. Each time they explain, oh yes, but we don't know if there will be one central body, or, you know, like in Belgium, we can have one in Brussels, one in Flanders, one in the German place, Germany place, Wallonia, and so on and so on. So we can do crazy, and maybe one federal to complexify everything. Okay, but so is there another reason, or it's only this? Because also we can imagine, or one for questions, one for social distancing. Okay, and then the second question.
That question first.
Well,
No.
Okay, it's okay. I think I'm okay. I remember.
Yeah. The second question is about
Thanks.
So the EHDS, is it possible in to have, for let's say in Greece, for example, to have this right to electronic access? That's for me very important, and that's in the EHDS, to have it already working before the EHDS is really let's say practically there. To make what Anton is saying, for example, possible. So for people who want to share, and I speak here about data from your medical doctor, data from your clinicians and so on, but also data from your iPhone and so on. Okay, and the last question, I vaguely remember, and I hope I'm wrong, but probably I'm right, but probably I'm wrong. But I vaguely remember that that in one meeting, people were speaking of one form for scientists to ask access to health data. Did I dream? Yeah.
There was, okay, thanks. So, okay, going back to the first question, I think the reason behind it is more or less something related to the sort of the governance of each country. So basically, as you said, Spain, for instance, has 17 different sort of regions, and each one has its own, let's say, governmental structure. Obviously, they fall under the same umbrella of Spain, but they have certain cases which legislation is very regional. So you have one aspect which is related to that. One other aspect is related to the different domains, probably, that they have different types of data. So in Greece, maybe the scenario would be easier, so we could have one HDAP, but in other countries, I think, like you said, like Flanders and Brussels, etc., or Spain, for instance, it could be a different story. So I think the legislation accommodates for that. Now, the second question was, maybe not very good. So
about electronic access to health data.
Yes, so
Is it possible to do it before?
for Greece, at least, there is already a deployment for My Health at EU, as I mentioned before. Maybe I didn't make it very clear. So My Health at EU has already an infrastructure which is optional, as you know. It's not something obligatory as EHDS is going to be. So now they have developed an infrastructure and they are able to share the patient summary and the paperless prescription with other countries. So they've done already some tests, they passed the audit, and you can go to another country, and the prescription that you had in Greece, you can actually have it in another country as if you were actually going into your local pharmacy and executing that prescription. So the steps are there. But the rest of the work needs to come by now with this project that we are doing. And regarding the third question associated with the application forms, the Commission is doing these different developments of different releases of the central platform, which includes forms associated with applications, with the information about the data sets and so forth. But this is at the central level. Obviously, this is a very good start for countries to use the same sort of structure for the forms, but each country might have different needs and different reasons, and that's associated with their legislation as well. So depending on the local legislation, these forms should be adopted, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a good beginning, but each country should follow their own legislation because restrictions do apply, et cetera. So I think this maybe covers all three questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we have a general question answer round before lunch. So it's open to everyone. If you have questions or anyone else, please feel free.
More questions?
It's a very enthusiastic group. There's never lack of.
Actually, it did. I was impressed.
Yes. And if you want, you can come straight.
David is.
David, you can.
Thanks. So my question is initially for Sophia, but maybe others may want to get involved too. Because you seem quite enthusiastic about the EU AI Act. You said, well, it's quite a good system, but which parts would you change if you really could get involved and do that? Or is it more important that instead of trying to wrestle the regulation, which is really hard, maybe we should be focusing on education, 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 because you also pointed out that people don't really understand what's going on. The healthcare professionals have a limited understanding of AI, and the general public has a limited understanding. So is that maybe where we should put our effort? Because changing regulations is very hard, takes a long time. Or maybe the most important initiative is a third, which is to make AI more understandable generally. Because even though you try and educate people about AI, it's still a very much of a black box thing. So perhaps the most important thing is to ensure that AI itself is able to explain accurately what its decisions are about.
Thank you very much for the question. So first of all, I will start from the bottom and then I will climb back up because I have a fresher memory of your last point. So this was very much something that I reflected upon during my PhD, basically whether we should prioritize explainability over the benefit that AI can actually bring. And that's a bit of the problem, right? So you either decide that the main value to be protected is understandability and explainability. And then what happens then is the fact that you exclude a certain AI system that simply at the stage of the technique today cannot be explained. So I think it's a matter of value prioritization. So either you go for explainability, either you go to maximize benefit. And personally, but this is very personally, I've rather prioritize benefit. Why? Because explainability is not a value in healthcare nowadays, because we don't explain all the time everything to the patient. Point one. Point two, literacy. So I was reflecting about this yesterday, because I have the lack and the peril of coming from a very remote rural area of Italy, right? So if I go back home, nobody knows what I'm talking about, you know, like, and they don't care that much because it's very much far away from their daily reality. So when I talk about AI literacy, I'm always thinking, what's the additional value from Tony, let's say, that is a average white male from my village? What is the added value for him when he goes to the doctor to know whether he's using an AI system? I don't think there is a value in that moment, but I think there is a value for Tony to know that artificial intelligence is a thing that is in our society in general, is not specifically for healthcare. And that's very much a point. So I would invest, if I was a legislator, if I was a policymaker, in literacy, digital literacy in general. And healthcare digital literacy is something that comes right afterwards. Medical competencies. I do have the luck to work with a lot of healthcare professionals, and they're not very enthusiastic about the idea of having more competencies to engage with, because their curriculum is quite heavy already. So they don't really want to do anything else. At the same time, they have a very different vision than us. And most of the time, they just think artificial intelligence-based medical devices are just medical devices for me. So they do not need anything else. So whenever they engage in some competencies framework, AI-related literacy thing, they do it out of personal interest, not really because they feel that it's going to improve their delivery of care as healthcare professional. I do believe that is a point, though, to again bring them aware, and perhaps it will pass through the fact that they are digital literate as citizens and not as healthcare professionals. So this brings back to the whole policy thing. About the AI Act, am I enthusiastic? I don't know. Like I'm very cautious about being enthusiastic or not. I find it very fascinating from a social point of view, because the AI Act came in a moment in which AI use was not yet that epidemic issue that we are discussing every day. So for me, it's more a societal response to a fear than an actual legislation that was needed, like compared to, for example, the medical device regulation that we really had to have, right? And to update when it was updated. So I would work a bit on the facility of applying the AI Act together with other regulations, because I don't think that it's a problem that we have only in healthcare. But perhaps in healthcare, you have the urge of applying it faster than in other, for example, like domains. I would say that. Does anybody want to jump in? So it's not a dual conversation, but
Always there, yes.
Yeah,
But
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe after.
No, it's not the same. Yeah, I mean, I had similar questions about AI Act. So one that goes back to what you said, I think there is perhaps a need in the AI Act to have to take some kind of addendum per domain. You know, it's like maybe there is a need
What is gonna happen?
for exactly. So that's one issue, and the other one is it's one of those legislation I think which are very, very, let's say, sensitive to change. Because if you remember, they were really closing up the legislation or really closing to an end, and then ChatGPT came up and they delayed the whole process. So AI and innovations in AI, I was discussing that with David during the break, are quite much in the beginning, let's say. I mean, they're quite evolving. So is it a legislation which is quite strong in terms of adaptability or sustainability? Depends on how you call it. Like how much.
Trying.
Yeah. I think, I mean, this is the basic challenge, I think, for me, like the domains and the subject to change, the flexibility to change.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Should I stand or?
No.
Okay.
Alexander, okay.
I forgot what I wanted to say. So what I wanted. Oh, so first, thank you. So one small aspect, maybe I think, to when it comes to the quality of data. I think actually yesterday was quite a already good talk on how this is going to be tackled. I was really happy to see in your slides the mentioning of the health union again, because this has been something I have been looking forward to for a long time, and then COVID happened, and the European Union finally kind of also saw this urgency. But now actually I don't see it happening, so I see there's less pressure now, because people kind of forget that there was a pandemic. There was, so I would like to maybe hear your thoughts about, is there a system in place, or on really checking on the member states, because we have all these nice plans now, like about closing having health data space, but I'm not so sure if it's so. What if if there's already a procedure of checking that it will really happen in the member states? And one maybe a remark to the AI Act. I mean, I find it interesting that I have a lot of techno-progressive friends which were always against regulation. And when generative AI happened, I finally they came across people saying, "Oh, we need to regulate this." And I found it very interesting that the people who were normally, or in my sphere, were always against regulation, they were very in favor of regulation. And so I think it's, from a political point of view, it's actually a good thing that the European Union, I think the first actor in the world, actually addressed it, at least. So I'm pretty sure we can do things better in the AI, but I think it's good that it started. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. So I mean, just for the first part, the direct grants that I mentioned before for both the primary health and secondary health are following very closely the overall plan that there is for the deployment of ESDS, from legislation up to the actual finalization of the central platform and the different member states and so on. So the best auditing that's happening now is the checking of the milestones and the deliverables that each member state has said that they're going to deliver in the terms of the systems and the connection and so forth. So this should be and is aligned with the overall plan. So that's the only method of let's say, checking and sort of pushing a bit forward on this being implemented because imagine this is a timeline that involves all member states, and it's quite a huge task on its own. I mean, to try to align all of them together. And this is a quite good instrument, because the time plan is sort of structured in a way that all member states are aligned towards this goal, which is a good thing.
Just
in the AI part,
yeah.
Maybe.
No, go.
No, I'm not perhaps them.
Just many interesting discussions. I want to say first that I totally agree with what you said, Sophia, about for me it's kind of I would say that even in a more brutal way. In most cases, when people have the choice between to be safe and to give their informed consent, they will choose to be, it is crazy. And I think it's only important to let people decide. It's when there is a choice, But in most cases, there is a good solution that's consensus, and then Okay. Now. In the program, you saw maybe that there was this general discussion with the speakers, and also about the discussion about anonymization and pseudonymization. I want to say a few words about this, because we didn't. To be honest, I tried to have one speaker to speak about this specifically, and I couldn't find. So I will say a very short summary of the situation as I understand, and maybe Aris or Sophia, you will correct me. And then ask a few questions, and this is for everybody to intervene also. So the very short summary of the situation is concerning the capacity, let's begin with the opt-out system for secondary data. There were many discussions, and at the end they decided that countries, if they want, they can organize a system of opt-out. Then in the countries where the system of opt-out is organized, people can opt out. Sorry for, I suppose opt-out is clear for everybody, yeah? But the opt-out is let's say for the recording. So opt-in is you have to say, I want to share my data. Opt-out is you have to say, I don't want to share my data. But concerning, so the opt-out is, so you don't want, but even if you don't want, and that's kind of funny, in some cases that are very urgent, very important, the states can still decide to use your health data. So this is, okay, now coming to anonymization and pseudonymization. As far as I understand, but that's also a question for you, Jan. So, well, anonymization is the data is anonymized, and after that you cannot find it again. So pseudonymization is ARIS is not ARIS, is number 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and there you can find back the information. So some people told me that that anonymization after that you cannot make signs. Yeah, because you cannot make a crossing of data, you know, because you know there are 60%, I don't know, 20% of people who smoke and 10% of the people who have lung cancer. But since it was anonymized, you don't know if they are the same. I want to have some comments on this, and maybe just a second. And maybe if my summary was not correct for some aspect, please correct me. Yeah, and Anton, please in this domain.
Yeah, so regarding the comment, it's partially right, partially wrong in a way that it depends like what you have in a data set. Maybe you have enough variables to train in a data set. The problem is more actually relevant for aging, because some politely saying not very smart individual considers that age should be rounded, for example, to like decades, because age is something that can de-anonymize a person, and it totally messes up analysis. There are so many wonderful data sets where they rounded the age, and you cannot do any aging research because you don't have real age. You have like accuracy of like 5 years. And it's totally useless. And I believe we have to fight to consider for actually not rounding age. I don't know how it's implemented in Greece.
I'm not involved in this area, so I wouldn't be able to tell you.
And another thing, actually, I wanted to ask, because the thing is that regulators are lagging behind technologies in most of the cases, but for example, in the field of privacy preserving machine learning, there are ways to actually run machine learning on data without actually knowing the data. So one is homomorphic encryption. Second one is, well, there are also ways like federated learning when you send the model to the hospital. And there are also ZK, zero knowledge proofs machine learning. And in such cases, I think the major burden is that you have to apply for access. That's something that kills many research initiatives, because the typical way how researchers work, I mean, if you don't have like some crazy applications, is that you found a data set somewhere, say on Hugging Face, you play with it in an exploratory way, you see that your models has like some potential in it, and then you push forward analyzing it. If for exploratory needs you have to write an application and pay a fee in a centralized system, it diminishes research, especially research by small research groups. And the thing is that in case of, for example, technologies like federated learning and so on, actually there are ways to make it. I don't know, do you actually, in your implementation, do you actually discuss privacy preserving machine learning to actually allow people to do privacy preserving machine learning without going through this forms filling process?
Well, I mean, currently we're designing, so Yeah, so currently we're designing, so the process is not finished with the specifications, but the idea is that we want to follow basically what the legislation is saying. So whatever is outside of the legislation is not part of this. So it has to be, let's say, perhaps done on a national level that does not conflict what the legislation is doing. And there is the part that we want to try and allow people to sort of try and understand whether this data set is suitable for their research before actually going into the secure processing environment, because everything has to be done through there. So in any case, the set or an aggregated set needs to be delivered in the SPE in order to be
And
analyzed.
secure processing environment, how in Greece it will be what? Something that certifies the requirements, or you want to have it centralized?
No, I mean, ITSA provides their own SPE according to the legislation. So this is something which we're trying, as I mentioned before, to be open source. It's going to be cloud-based, and it's going to be a security environment that provides some analytical tools as well. And the data cannot be, for instance, downloaded, they cannot be tampered, they cannot be... So, I mean, this is more or less what the general legislation is saying. But as I mentioned before, we are actually now designing it. So I'm going to be able to provide more information as we go along. I mean, it's a 4-year project, so we are at the beginning now. So we have time in front of us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can just confirm that what Anton was saying. It's right. So essentially, when we're talking about data, we're talking about rows and columns, and we're talking about sort of some values which are assigned. So for the purpose of what we are doing, it actually for us it's fully anonymized data. So for general drug discovery projects. I actually have a question for Alex because I do consider myself a tech proggy, if you like, so progressive technologist. I'm surrounded by people who are sane, and nobody's really excited about the AI Act. So wanted to learn, like, what are the common arguments of your friends who are excited about this? Why are they excited?
Alex, you wanna look at that?
Where did you find such people actually? I mean, I'm a transhumanist movement.
Can you ask me?
It's, for example, so I think what people are especially concerned about is really the existential risk of AI. This is what people are so afraid of. That's why they are, and they're actually people, I mean, I have some people who are actually, I mean, longevity people are, but let's say the mild crowd, but you also have, for example, chronicists, and I would say chronicists often, when I speak to people, chronicists are often, for me, the people who are the most, let's say, open people to technology. Yeah, I mean, they really see technology in a way as a savior for forever. Yeah, and these people are very afraid of general risks due to AI, and I was very surprised that they were so calling for legislation, for regulation.
Okay, I jump in because I wanted to ask more or less the same question. So, do you think that people have an actual, like, because it's still a very general fear, and I'm wondering if it's more like a feeling towards AI that is not very much related to the possible technicalities of it, but more related to, I don't know, this fascination we have around it, and like how much we create a dystopic vision around this technology. Because I'm still struggling to see what's so exceptional about this technology. Okay, we have massive possibilities, but is it scary? Like, we are still the one doing it. So maybe I'm too much of a legal one, but please do.
I will be addressing that point in my remarks later this afternoon. But I will say this, there are many people who are worried about existential risks who are not excited about the EU AI Act. They're sort of resigned and say, well, it's not great, but at least it's a step forwards. So I don't know many people who are really enthusiastic through and through about it, but they say at least it's a start and we have to improve it. I'll give you an example. Elon Musk Elon Musk said as far ago as about 2015, normally he doesn't like regulations. Normally he's a go-ahead guy and wants to bust through lots of oppositions and bureaucrats, but he would make an exception for existential risk of AI. And even recently, he was actually a supporter of the California legislation, which in the end was vetoed by the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. But Elon Musk said that was a shame and there should have been some regulation in place there. And what are we worried about? Well, we're worried about all technology is a double-edged sword. And AI is a very general purpose technology. It can be used in all kinds of ways. At the same time, it can be used to develop new drugs that have low toxicity. With the same program, with a slight change, can develop drugs which have got a lethal toxicity. And who's going to be daft enough to generate that? Well, there are some crazy people in the world who want to generate that. So that's an argument for being careful and for trying to have some guardrails. It's not an argument that says that the EU AI Act is the final word on it. It's just a step in the right direction, as was the California Act.
Thank you, David. My view on the AI Act is that, well, AI Act will not reduce the likelihood of a bad event happening in AI. It will reduce the likelihood of that event happening in Europe. So let's just be honest. They're like over-regulating Europe is not gonna change anything.
But to be honest, that you can always say. That's like, you know, if you're not doing it, oh, China will be doing it. You know, I've been hearing that forever as an argument to basically forget all the morals and ethics. So yes, I would argue it's still worthwhile that basically do what you can and don't say it will happen anyway. I think it's still a good argument that if we keep on acting.
So before I give the word to Anton, a few comments. What you are asking, Sophia, I understand it, and I think most people understand it until the moment that artificial intelligence could be really better than humans. But it is, I would say, a question almost totally non-related to the discussions here. But it's a big question, and indeed, many of the very techno-progressive people like myself, they think, yeah, this could be really very, very, very dangerous and suppress us. And as a longevist, I'm interested in living longer, so not to be destroyed. But this is really a question outside of the let's say healthcare directly. I would something that I will also say soon. It's I think if you use AI really first for longevity and resilience, the risks are a bit less important. Then to Jan, I will give you one example that I don't like so much, but that's GDPR. GDPR is only European, but de facto it's in the world. Among other things, because Microsoft and the others, they have the choice between to create one environment for everybody, complicated and respecting the rules for everybody in the world, or to create two environments, and that is even more complicated. So that's why in many cases, and even in China, for a big part, they copy-paste the legislation, the laws at the European level. The big part is, of course, except the fact that the PCC, Communist Party, and the state can do more or less what they want. Now, before I give the word to Anton for the last question remark, I propose to continue the informal way to 2 p.m. except if there are people having comments, questions concerning anonymization, pseudonymization, because I think this is really important and was not discussed. Yeah.
First, I think citing highly hypocritical people like Musk who act and say totally different things is not a good thing. Like he talked a lot about free speech, but he fired people immediately for pretty much every idea of saying things freely in his companies. But that's example. But in terms of this terrible US California-based act, the problem, and I'm really happy that it was cancelled, and many researchers were against because it was punishing open source models, because it was almost impossible to put an open source models, and it means like a regulatory capture for large companies who can comply. And the major risk for most of the regulations is regulatory capture, that large companies, they can have a whole department to deal with regulations while small companies don't. And also in terms of explainability, observability, majority of models are usually, with some exception, majority of people don't train models from scratch. They take, I mean, if you talk about large models, and they take some existing open source model and they fine tune it for the application. So, and obviously it's literally impossible like to say all the details how the parent model was trained, because you just don't download it from somewhere. It can be good to have explainability on validation set to some extent. In terms of black box, yesterday was it yesterday? Well, technically at my and Livia workshop, we actually talked about explainability. So you can have an explanatory model that runs on top of a black box model that is not explainable. It can provide to some degree partial explainability of decisions. I think it is useful to at least facilitate development of explanatory models, but in some cases it's very hard to make a really good explanatory model. So I mean, the regulations, they should facilitate it, but in some cases it's impossible to have good explanation. So it's, I support Sophia in this regard, that in cases where it's not possible to have good explanatory model, but it's huge benefit, it should be allowed to have a black box.
So then maybe David, and then you.
Okay.
Last one. Maximum
Yeah.
60 seconds.
Should small companies be exempted from regulation? Well, we're going to have some sandwiches soon. Maybe the sandwiches came from a very small company. Maybe the small company can say, hey, because we're small, we don't need to follow the food safety rules. We can just be as innovative as we like. We don't want big food to slow us down. Would that be a good circumstance? No, we need regulations for food so that we can be confident we're not going to get food poisoning from this. And we need regulations on AI too. And if the small companies struggle, then we need to help them so that they aren't held up. So let's find regulations. So I actually was disappointed that Gavin Newsom caved to the pressure from big tech, at least some big tech. Other big tech would have supported it. Anthropic were much in favor of it. So it's a bit of a shame. Anyway, let's continue this discussion informally. And I'll give the final words to Shivani.
Thank you. We will take a break for lunch now, and we will be back by 1:59.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I know people who produce